What if the difference between a life of scattered attempts and a life of steady accomplishment came down to one clear system you could use this week? This summary of goal setting, plan your life to get things done, strips goal advice of slogans and sentiment and replaces it with a tight, testable workflow, how to choose the right goals, how to break them into unambiguous actions, how to prioritize when everything feels urgent, and how to measure progress so you stop guessing and start proving. You will get concrete templates you can apply today, a one-page goal filter, a weekly work cadence that protects high-leverage hours, and 3 failure-proof rules to keep momentum when motivation fades. Listen the one rule you can implement tomorrow, run it for 12 days, and treat the result as data rather than judgment. If you want plans that produce results instead of wishes, stay with this audio until the end. Every minute is a practical step toward finishing what matters. Chapter 1. Choosing the right goals, filters, trade-offs, and the one-page rule. The most common failure in goal setting is not laziness. It is poor selection. People pursue many goals simultaneously because each feels valuable in isolation, and then none of them get done well. The practical countermeasure is a tight selection filter that converts vague desires into a prioritized set of commitments you can actually execute. Start with a concise one-page goal filter composed of 3 questions applied to every candidate goal. Question 1. Impact. If achieved, how materially will this goal change my life or work in the next 12 months? Score it by the simplest metric available: revenue, time saved, relationships improved, or stress reduced. Question 2. Leverage. Does progress scale with small, repeatable actions that compound, or does the goal demand constant linear effort? Goals that scale with leverage, writing a repeatable product, building a system, learning a high multiple skill, are preferable because they reduce ongoing maintenance costs. Question 3. Edge. Do you have a unique advantage, experience, or willingness to endure the early, unglamorous work required? Edge is rarely absolute but often sufficient. It differentiates realistic bets from fantasy. Apply these 3 questions and eliminate goals that score poorly on 2 or more dimensions. The next step is to convert the surviving goals into a one-page commitment document. For each chosen goal, write a single-sentence outcome metric that defines success, a 90-day sprint target expressed in measurable units, and 3 explicit constraints such as budget, weekly time allocation, and a maximum acceptable opportunity cost. Constraints prevent escalation of ambition into grand plans that consume attention and morale. Once you have the one-page commitment, conduct a simple portfolio check. If you have more than 3 active goals, either reduce the list or convert some into watch goals, ideas to seed with small experiments rather than full commitments. Human attention is scarce, focus is the operational advantage. A disciplined selection process also creates psychological clarity. When a new, shiny idea appears, you can test it quickly against a filter rather than starting an emotionally costly re-evaluation. Finally, build an explicit retirement policy for goals. Every quarter, ask whether each active goal still passes the filter given new information. If not, archive it and free the attention. Choosing the right goals is an act of subtraction as much as addition. You gain leverage by narrowing the field and converting selected goals into constrained, measurable commitments that guide weekly action. Chapter 2. Decomposing. Goals into projects and tasks. The 90-day sprint and atomic actions. A clear goal without a practical decomposition remains an aspiration. The essential technique is to convert outcomes into project maps composed of milestones, weekly objectives, and atomic tasks that could be executed in isolated time blocks. Begin with the 90-day sprint as the basic unit of execution. For each chosen goal, define a single 90-day objective that, if achieved, would constitute meaningful forward progress toward the ultimate outcome. The 90-day horizon balances urgency with sufficient time to iterate and learn. Break the 90-day objective into 4 monthly milestones and then into weekly objectives. Weekly objectives must be framed as outputs, not inputs. Say, complete Module 1 draft rather than work on Module 1. Outputs are testable and reduce ambiguity. Each weekly objective decomposes into atomic actions, tasks that take 15 to 90 minutes and that can be executed within a single calendar block. Atomic actions are the only units you schedule and track daily because they remove the illusion that progress requires perfect conditions. The map should also include explicit stop rules and quality criteria for each milestone. What will you accept as minimum viable output, and under what conditions will you iterate versus pause and rework assumptions? Stop rules prevent sunk cost escalation and keep decisions evidence-based. A parallel practice is to create a dependency graph highlighting tasks that block other work. Invest early in clearing high-value bottlenecks to accelerate downstream flow. Use a simple task board with 3 columns to manage flow: backlog, doing, done, and limit work in progress to 3 atomic tasks per week for each sprint to prevent context switching costs. Finally, schedule a short weekly planning ritual on the same weekday and time each week where you move tasks into the week, assign time blocks and surface risks. The ritual should take no more than 30 minutes and ends with a single week commitment statement. The 3 outputs you will deliver by next week. Decomposition converts abstract goals into a manageable operating system of sprints, milestones, and atomic execution. It turns procrastination, which feeds on ambiguity, into a sequence of small, inevitable acts that compound into real achievement. Chapter 3. Prioritization and Trade-off Management. The practical art of saying no. Once goals are decomposed into projects and tasks, the daily problem becomes prioritization. Prioritization is not a feeling but a governance process with rules you can apply under time pressure. Begin by adopting a simple priority matrix that evaluates tasks by expected impact and required effort. Tasks with high impact and low effort are immediate candidates for execution. High impact and high effort tasks require protected, distraction-free blocks. Low impact tasks should be delegated or deferred. To operationalize, create 3 priority lanes in your weekly plan: critical, high value, and maintenance. Critical tasks are those that, if not completed, materially impair a sprint milestone. High value tasks advance a milestone but are not urgent. Schedule them in prime energy blocks. Maintenance tasks preserve systems, email, billing, minor admin, and are delegated or batched to specific times. The second practical tool is the daily 1 to 3 rule. Identify 1 primary outcome for the day and up to 2 secondary outcomes. Reserve at least 1 uninterrupted prime work block, typically 2 hours during your highest energy window, for the primary outcome. This rule reduces the illusion that multitasking equals productivity. The third governance is the explicit trade-off ledger. Every time you accept a new commitment that displaces a current task or goal, record what you deprioritized and why. That ledger prevents stealth drift, where new, good opportunities steadily erode focus on existing high-value work. Saying no becomes a measurable act tied to trade-offs rather than a vague moral posture. Fourth, schedule a monthly trade-off audit where you review the ledger and reassign priorities if evidence shows a poor allocation of attention. Finally, build default no-go boundaries, time blocks reserved for focus, weekly caps on meeting hours, and a rule that major new commitments require a 12-day pilot and partner review before acceptance. Prioritization under stress is simplified by rules that convert values into predictable actions, the discipline of clear lanes, primary daily outcomes, and a transparent trade-off ledger reduces cognitive friction and preserves the limited resource that powers long-term accomplishment. Attention. Chapter 4. Execution. Cadence, weekly operating rhythm, prime blocks, and rapid feedback. Loop's execution depends on cadence. The most robust systems integrate a weekly operating rhythm, protected prime blocks for deep work, and short feedback loops that convert results into learning quickly. Implement a weekly operating rhythm comprised of 4 recurring elements: a short weekly planning session, 2 to 4 prime work blocks, a midweek quick check, and a concise weekly review. The weekly planning session, scheduled at the same time each week, sets the 3 outputs for the week, schedules prime blocks, and allocates 1 day for admin consolidation. Prime blocks are protected 2-hour windows during which you perform deep, high-leverage work without interruptions. Protect them by muting notifications, closing email, and using a visible cue to signal unavailability. Assign the most difficult or highest impact tasks to your first prime block, following your natural peak energy. The midweek quick check is a 15-minute ritual to verify progress against metrics and to adjust scope if necessary. Catching deviations early prevents late-week panic. The weekly review is a disciplined 10 to 20-minute session where you evaluate outputs, record one learning, and update the decisions ledger. The review should always end with a single improvement action to test in the following week, one small change that addresses the most salient bottleneck. Rapid feedback loops are the engine of iteration. Design experiments with short timelines, measurable signals. Chapter 5. Accountability, measurement, and recovery plans. Systems to keep momentum. Sustained progress requires accountability and measurable indicators that predict success rather than after-the-fact tallies. Start by instrumenting your projects with one leading metric and one lagging metric. The leading metric predicts future success: daily word count for a book, conversion rate for a funnel test, or weekly retention for a product trial. The lagging metric validates outcomes, revenue, published chapters, or completed courses. Track the leading metric daily and the lagging weekly. If the leading metric stalls, trigger a predefined recovery protocol before the lagging metric declines. Accountability is socialized through a small, regular review with a partner, coach, or peer group, where you present your weekly outputs and the next week's commitments in one paragraph. The act of public commitment increases follow-through because the social cost of missing targets becomes real. Additionally, create an automated progress dashboard that visualizes the leading metric over time and flags negative trends. When a negative trend appears, apply a short recovery plan, a rapid root cause analysis, a 12-day experiment to remove the bottleneck, and a replenishment action such as reducing concurrent commitments to free attention. Recovery plans must be short, prescriptive, and time-limited to avoid moralizing failure into stagnation. Finally, institutionalize small rewards and rituals to maintain morale. Schedule meaningful celebrations when a 90-day sprint completes, and create micro-rewards for weekly wins drawn from a pre-funded joy account. The combination of measurement, social accountability, and short recovery protocols converts momentum into resilience. It ensures that when setbacks appear, they trigger correction rather than abandonment, and that incremental work aggregates into dependable accomplishment. Chapter 6: Sustaining Momentum Through Adaptive Cadence. Sustaining momentum is different from kickstarting a project. It is the quiet art of designing a rhythm that preserves energy, learning, and forward progress across months and years. The practical starting point is to design an operating cadence that balances intense creation with recovery and with rapid learning cycles. First, protect prime work blocks each week. 2 or 3 multi-hour windows reserved for your most important creative or strategic work. Treat those blocks as sacrosanct meetings with your future results. Calendar them weekly at your peak energy times and signal the world that those hours are non-negotiable. Second, adopt a short-cycle experiment model. Break larger sprints into 12-day probes with explicit hypotheses, signals, and kill rules. 12 days is long enough to move an experiment into meaningfully informative territory and short enough to avoid sunk cost escalation. Each probe has a single leading metric you check every 3 days, so adjustments are data-driven rather than reactive. Third, create transition rituals that move your brain from rapid reaction to deep work and back. A 5-minute physical reset before a prime block, a 10-minute review at the end of each deep session to record what changed and what will be tested next, and a brief post-mortem of 12 minutes when a probe ends. These rituals conserve decision energy and accelerate learning by forcing clarity on what worked. Fourth, manage attention breadth consciously. Rotate domains of focus on a multi-week cycle so that incubation and cross-pollination happen naturally. Spend 3 weeks primarily on product design, then 2 weeks on distribution experiments, then 1 week on skills development. This rotation reduces monotony while keeping cumulative progress. Fifth, institutionalize small recovery windows and micro-sabbaticals as part of your cadence. Short pauses prevent burnout and often enable sudden leaps in insight. Schedule a day every quarter without meetings or deliverables to synthesize what you've learned and to imagine next experiments. Sixth, create a weekly quick check that surfaces 1 leading indicator for each active goal and 1 friction metric, what's making progress harder than it should be. If a friction metric spikes, invoke a small adaptation, trim scope, add a 2-day focused repair, or pause an experiment. Finally, guard momentum by protecting identity and social accountability. Share weekly outputs with a trusted peer or small advisory circle. Publicizing small wins and failures builds discipline and reduces the temptation to chase novelty. Sustaining momentum is less about intensity and more about calibrated rhythm. Protect prime work, test rapidly, ritualize transitions, rotate focus, allow recovery, and maintain accountability so compoundable work continues while your energy stays intact. Chapter 7: Overcoming Obstacles with Predefined Recovery. Protocols. Obstacles are inevitable. What separates teams and individuals who stall from those who recover is the quality of their pre-written recovery protocols. The practical method is to identify your 3 most likely failure modes for each major objective, and then script the recovery steps you will take if signals indicate trouble. Start by listing major projects, and for each define the primary leading metrics you will monitor. For each metric, imagine 3 plausible ways it could fail and write the recovery action in plain steps. Who will act? What resources will be reallocated? What immediate pilot will run? And how long you will allow for the recovery before changing course. The key is specificity. Avoid vague directives. For example, if user acquisition drops below a target conversion rate, the recovery script might say, run a 7-day message variant test, cut paid budget in half, and redeploy that budget into 2 partnership pilots with a 1-week evaluation. Next, rehearse the most damaging failure scenarios with a short tabletop exercise. Simulate a supply disruption, large account loss, or a critical product defect, so your team knows both the words and the immediate actions to take. Rehearsal reduces the paralysis of rare but consequential events. Third, build a short-stop rule that prevents heroic doubling down on failing tactics. If the leading metric falls below a threshold and the recovery sequence fails to produce improvement after its pre-specified time window, trigger a defined exit or pivot to preserve capital and attention. Fourth, maintain a small tactical reserve for recovery's time, cultural energy, and at least a minimal financial cushion, so emergency actions do not cannibalize future optionality. Fifth, practice quick post-mortems after recoveries that focus on signals missed, and 1 procedural change to prevent repetition. Capture these changes in your operations playbook. Sixth, cultivate psychological resilience protocols for your team, short, structured support rituals after sharp setbacks such as a brief debrief, a shared meal, and a 48-hour reset period, because emotional recovery is operationally important. Finally, preserve humility rituals, continuous learning, external critiques, and evidence-based scaling decisions that convert obstacles into learning steps rather than identity crises. With predefined recovery protocols, obstacles stop being unpredictable disasters and become solvable episodes in a disciplined cycle of testing, adaptation, and learning. Chapter 8: Leadership, Influence, and Aligning Goals with Others. When goals depend on other people, the leadership skill is not charisma but clarity and reliable delivery. Start by translating each goal into one clear, compelling purpose statement that you can convey in a single sentence. A crisp purpose aligns attention faster than long explanations because humans respond immediately to a shared North Star. Pair the purpose with 3 concrete metrics so the team knows how success will be recognized and measured. Next, codify roles and decision rights. Leaders who wish to scale influence define who decides what and at what level of cost or risk. Small delegation matrices reduce bottlenecks and empower operators to act without constant permission. Create 1-page playbooks that describe the scope of work acceptance criteria and sample decisions. These documents make handoffs cleaner and reduce repeated questions. Influence grows through predictable competence. Build credibility by shipping small public experiments quickly and documenting outcomes so stakeholders see evidence rather than promises. Use micro-milestones to create forward progress and public wins that attract more resources and goodwill. When friction arises, deploy a short conflict resolution ritual, private clarification, followed by a documented adjustment, and a one-paragraph shared summary. This prevents unresolved tensions from festering. Invest in the social mechanisms of trust, give credit generously, document commitments clearly, follow up promptly, and practice candid feedback that is kind and direct. Finally, align incentives with simple structures, small equity, clear revenue shares, or time-bound bonuses, and test them with short pilots. Leaders with aligned incentives find energy amplified because people act like owners. Leadership for goals is not about grand speeches. It is about clarity, systems, delegated authority, evidence of delivery, and rituals that transform friction into constructive coordination. Chapter 9: Scaling Goals across teams and systems. Scaling a goal beyond a single person requires turning tacit knowledge into replicable systems, delegating decision rights, and protecting optionality for new experiments. The first step is to identify the core value-creating process and to codify it into a modular playbook that includes inputs, outputs, and acceptance tests. A modular approach allows you to teach parts of the system independently and to recombine modules for new workflows without rewriting everything. Pilot the playbook with a small group to gather edge cases, then iterate documentation so it becomes a living artifact rather than a static manual. Governance must scale with clarity, not control. Define thresholds where routine decisions are delegated to team members and create an escalation path for edge decisions that require strategic judgment. Build a lightweight dashboard that surfaces leading indicators for each module and triggers short tactical reviews when any signal degrades. Invest in training and in short validation tasks for new operators, simple paid micropilots that confirm competence before increasing responsibility. Use role-based ownership, not task slicing. Give one person end-to-end accountability for a result rather than splitting a process into tiny, disconnected chores. This reduces coordination costs and improves accountability. Protect quality with small acceptance checks and a quarterly audit, where a small independent review compares documented playbooks to observed practice and highlights drift. Scale distribution with partnerships where sensible, pilot partner integrations with clear revenue and quality metrics, and only scale when unit economics are validated. Finally, preserve a small experimental budget and time allocation in your system so you can keep testing new asymmetries. Scaled systems stagnate without a fraction of resources devoted to exploration. When systems are modular, governance is crisp and experiments are protected, scaling becomes repeatable rather than accidental. Chapter 10: Mastery, Integration, and Sustainable Achievement. Mastery is the integration of skill systems and identity, the practices you repeat until they become your default approach to work and life. Pick 2 to 3 keystone skills that multiply across your goals and allocate deliberate practice time weekly, focused effort on the edge of competence with immediate feedback. Combine deliberate practice with public artifacts that force completion and external accountability. Integrate your goal habits into life infrastructure, calendar prime blocks, automated financial flows, and social commitments, so the practice is reinforced by environment rather than by willpower alone. Emphasize compound feedback loops, small experiments documented and iterated with short post-mortems, and one actionable improvement per cycle. Protect long-term creativity by scheduling periodic synthesis time, a half-day every quarter, to step out of execution and connect patterns across projects. Mastery respects recovery, Build in multi-day breaks and short sabbaticals to replenish cognitive resources and to allow subconscious problem solving. Teach and mentor as a route to refinement. Explaining systems to others clarifies your own thinking and surfaces hidden assumptions. Finally, define a sustainable horizon. Choose goals that align with your life priorities and structure systems so achievement is an ongoing practice rather than a one-time sprint. Sustainable mastery preserves curiosity, protects health, and makes repeated high-quality work the default rather than the exception. Conclusion: the practice of systems over willpower. The single through line of effective goal work is systems over willpower, one-page filters, 90-day sprints, prime work blocks, clear recovery protocols, modular playbooks, and a small experimental budget. This week, take 3 actions. Review your one-page goal filter for the top active goal. Protect 2 prime blocks this week for the 90-day sprint. And design one 12-day probe with a clear signal and a kill rule. Document the result in a short decision ledger and commit to one small procedural change based on what you learn. Repeating that cycle turns scattered intentions into cumulative results. Over months, the small repeated systems become a lifestyle that consistently converts goals into finished work rather than into unfinished plans. If you want the next pass edited to precise per-chapter word counts, or formatted especially for 11 Labs voice pacing I will refine immediately,